This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, a run through the markets. Some data coming out of Kenya. Outflows from Kenya's equity market slowed down to just over $9 million in the first quarter of the year. That was roughly a third or so of the outflows in the final quarter of 2020. Foreign investors, however, still do dominate the trading in these markets, accounting for roughly 60% of all trades made in Q1. The Nigerian index closing about 0.3% higher. GT Bank shares rose by a significant margin, up 4.2%, but is still negative on a year-to-date basis, down some 3.4%. Here's what's coming up. Government delegates and business owners are meeting in Kinshasa to chart ways of fast-tracking implementation of the CFTA. Tanzania is set to start exporting refined gold after its refinery goes live. And the UK unveiled some pretty ambitious targets to cut down carbon emissions. We'll have the details next. Let us start in the world of continental trade. Delegations from Europe, the United States, Middle East, Asia, and 19 member states of the Union of African Shippers Council have converged in the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, the delegates there are discussing ways of fast-tracking the implementation of a single market for goods and services under the African Continental Free Trade Area. This initiative is the first major event on the CFTA since the advent of the pandemic.
African leaders in the freight sector are in the DRC capital, Kinshasa, to hammer out details of a collaboration to enable them to boost trade on the continent. Their meeting is a follow-up on an initiative that was signed by 44 African countries in 2018, known as the African Continental Free Trade Area. It's an ambitious trade agreement that seeks to create a market where goods and services will move freely. The DRC president, Félix Tshisekedi, believes the initiative will lift millions of Africans out of poverty.
The start of trading under this initiative has shown that we will become economically independent in Africa. I want to declare that my desire is to see this collective effort transform our economies.
Africa is endowed with a lot of natural resources, but most of its exports are unprocessed. The leaders here hope to change that.
When we are going to fight as a bloc, then we are strong. But if we are going individually, we will not be strong. And the sense of African continental free trade area is that we need to be a bloc, a strong bloc of Africa.
The quest to integrate African economies has been expressed by many African leaders for decades, but political differences and poor infrastructure has blighted that goal. The DRC is a member of the Southern African Development Community, an intergovernmental organization that's set to benefit from the removal of trade barriers in Africa.
I think that this agreement presents opportunities on both sides, for DRC as well as for South Africa. For export of trade in goods, export of trade in services, for the establishment of linkages and regional value chains, to make sure that we accelerate industrial development on both sides.
Many African economies have been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has made this push for economic integration a priority. The officials here plan to come up with a resolution about easing business regulations across the continent on Thursday. Chris Sochamringa, Kinshasa.
Now, Luxembourg-based Millicom International Cellular, which trades under the brand name that is more commonly known, Tigo, has announced that it will finalize the divestment of its African holdings with the sale of the company's operations in Tanzania. The announcement follows a similar deal reached early in April, which saw Millicom sign an agreement for the sale of its stake in India's Airtel Tigo to the Ghanaian government. Millicom is selling off its Tanzanian operations to a consortium led by Action. It's a Pan-African group that was part of the consortium that acquired Millicom's operations in Senegal in 2018. Tigo is Tanzania's second largest telecommunications operator after Vodacom, with over 13 million subscribers by the end of 2020. On to North Africa now. Egypt has been ranked third best in a ranking in a report that covers the economic resilience of various economies. The UAE came first on that particular list, followed by India. Now, the report just does show that the North African nation did not fare well in the open for business category. From Cairo, here's Yasser Hakim.
The improvement in Egypt's ranking is a reflection of the flexibility of the economy that has allowed it to sustain external shocks. Egypt is one of a few countries worldwide that had managed a positive growth rate amidst the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
It goes back to the economic reform program started in November 2016, which included liberalizing the currency exchange rate. This has created stability in the market, confidence in the reforms, and a positive outlook. The petrochemicals and petroleum sector is a leader in strengthening the economy's resilience, especially after the latest natural gas discoveries, which transformed Egypt into a major LNG producer and exporter in the Mediterranean region.
The economy was also supported by mushrooming inflows of remittances from Egyptian expats that has made up for losses from main sectors like tourism. The report by US News predicts future growth for the North African country in terms of per capita purchasing power and parity GDP. Although Egypt has fared well in the economic resilience category, there has been a downside in what is called open for business. Egypt ranks a low 66th out of 78 countries in that category. Most experts believe this is owed to an inherited system of red tape and bureaucracy that has kept many investors hesitant.
The Egyptian economy is marred by a slow routine process that complicates and prolongs establishing a business. The government is working on trying to eliminate these hurdles to increase the foreign investments. It's a main issue being tackled by the government to provide the proper climate for investments in Egypt. One way is successful partnerships with the private sector in big projects like textile manufacturing, car production, and renewable energy. This could encourage more businesses to look to Egypt.
According to UNCTAD, Egypt had topped Africa by attracting $9 billion of foreign direct investments pre-COVID in 2019. However, the government is targeting at least $12 billion per year post-COVID, and to diversify the portfolio to increase manufacturing, as most of those investments were in the real estate sector. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Back into East Africa, where an estimated 5,000 hospitality workers in Kenya have started to receive their first doses of the vaccine developed by AstraZeneca. The country's tourism ministry launched this drive as part of efforts to revive the tourism sector, which has been badly affected by the pandemic. With the details, here's CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy.
Chief guest for those words of...
Hundreds of hospitality workers queued to get their first shots of the AstraZeneca vaccine in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. The country's tourism sector secured 50,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine to inoculate priority hospitality care workers as part of efforts to bring back to life the tourism industry.
This would give me the confidence to, to work without really fearing that I might pick up the virus from somebody who's not maybe been vaccinated.
So we've closed businesses because of fear of COVID, which is true. So we are happy. We've had an onset from today, and I hope the pace is maintained so that it cuts across the country.
The vaccination covers those working in tourism, travel and hotel sectors, and is expected to revitalize the tourism sector dampened by global restrictions on travel. It will also strengthen Kenya's commitment to international health requirements upon the lifting of travel restrictions between countries. This initiative is aimed at the relaunch of tourism activities under conditions of full health protection for all hospitality workers in Kenya. According to the government, the second phase of the vaccine rollout is expected soon, subject to vaccine availability and arrival.
Despite the challenges of supply of the vaccines, and we are supposed to be part of the front line essential service to be given the vaccine, but because of the shortage and delays of production, we managed to get at least 50,000 vaccines for the sector to start off.
Kenya's tourism sector contributes over $300 million in revenue to the country's economy every year. But the sector has experienced a slump in tourism since the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
All right, then our round of company news starts in the world of retail. South Africa's Pick n Pay's final set of results under the outgoing CEO Richard Brasher showed a near 20% decline in profits due to one-off retrenchment costs, the economic impact of the pandemic and lockdown restrictions too. Trading bans in April and May last year meant that the retailer could not actually sell goods that had a much higher profit margin than food. Authorities in South Africa banned general merchandise and clothing sales at the end of March 2020. They also prohibited the sale of cigarettes for months, and they enforced a 19-week ban on the sale of alcohol, in addition to weekend alcohol sale restrictions. Kenya's Bamburi Cement more than tripled its net earnings in the year ending in December to record its largest earnings jump among NSE-listed firms. The cement manufacturer reported net earnings of about $10 million in the period under review. Bamburi's performance was helped by a major reduction in costs. The performance saw the company resume dividend payments. It's proposing a dividend payout of about 2.8 US cents a share. The dividend will be distributed on the 15th of July to shareholders on record as on the 16th of May. The video streaming colossus Netflix has reported a slowdown in subscriber growth, and that sent its shares tumbling. Some 3.98 million people signed up for Netflix between January and March. That was well short of the forecast of 6 million. The company attributes that shortfall to a lack of apparently new content. Netflix shares were down 11% in after-hours trading to $489. That wiped out $25 billion from the company's market cap. And finally, Credit Suisse is set to report the biggest pre-tax quarterly loss in more than 4 years, following a string of deeply costly errors. The Swiss lender announced earlier this month that it took a $4.7 billion hit from the meltdown of the US family fund Archegos Capital. It now expects to report a pre-tax loss of about $960 million for the first quarter. This Archegos saga led to the departure of the bank's investment bank CEO and the chief risk and compliance officer as well. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up. Tanzania is set to start exporting refined gold after its first domestic refinery goes live. And we'll dive into the business of football as all 6 Premier League teams involved in the European Super League withdraw.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business. Only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference. Welcome back. Tanzania is set to start exporting refined gold following the launch of its first ever domestic refinery. It's based in the northern city of Mwanza, and this refinery is a joint venture between the State Mining Corporation on one hand and entities in the private sector. It should be able to produce refined gold with a purity of about 99.9%. Here's CGTN's Isaac Lucando with the details.
A modern gold refinery facility is scheduled for launch in Tanzania this month. With a capacity to refine 480 kilograms of gold a day and possibly extending to 960 kilograms, it will be the largest refinery in East Africa.
The presence of a refinery will enable our small-scale miners to first obtain a reliable market, get a definite price, and also be able to sell their gold in a secure place.
At a cost of $3.8 million, it is expected to not only increase the country's revenue, but also create direct employment to some 120 Tanzanians. Once open, the plant will rank third in Africa in terms of processing capacity.
I believe this refinery will help many people from outside the country sell their minerals, because there are countries out there that do not mine but have refineries and sell a lot of gold.
The commencement of the refinery's operations is expected to settle a long-standing legal issue surrounding Tanzania's ban on the export of unprocessed minerals, which has been in place since 2017. The country exports gold mainly to South Africa, India and Switzerland. Tanzania is Africa's fourth largest gold producer after South Africa, Ghana and Mali. The Central Bank of Tanzania reports that earnings from gold exports rose 34% last year, helped by increased output and higher prices. With over $3 billion worth of gold exports last year, the government sees mining as a key driver of economic growth. It says it plans to do more to uplift the sector.
The government will continue to give priority to smaller scale miners, which includes setting aside mining areas, providing licenses and giving them access to simple technologies for extraction and processing of minerals.
The refinery is one of 3 that are set to be built in the country. Through the refinery, Tanzania hopes to get higher gold prices, reducing smuggling, uplifting the mining sector and the economy in the process. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
All right, then on to the business of soccer. Now, of course, you've probably heard about this entire thing about the European Super League, and you'll certainly hear a lot more about it over the weekend when our colleagues in the sports department do analyse it in great detail. But let's look at the business side of it today. On Sunday, 12 of the top European football clubs announced that they'll be launching a breakaway league to be led by the Real Madrid president, Florentino Perez. Now, at the time, the plan aimed to challenge the already established UEFA Champions League. All 6 Premier League teams involved in the European Super League, however, have now withdrawn from that particular competition. So how did it go from we have a new competition to virtually what it is now, nothing, so quickly? Let's explore that in a bit more detail with Elena Casas, who joins us now live from London. So, Elena, let's start there. The 6 clubs that were supposed to take part in this have all now left. So, what happens now?
Yes, the Super League took less than 48 hours to completely implode. Chelsea was the first to pull out last night after fan protests outside their home game against Brighton, and that set off a rush for the exit, with all 6 English clubs announcing they would leave the project last night. Inter Milan and Atletico Madrid withdrew this morning, and Juventus chairman Andrea Agnelli, who was one of the driving forces behind this, told Reuters this morning he had to accept the idea was dead, although he continues to defend it, and he blamed the collapse on interfering British politicians. But what's really happened here isn't down to the influence of politicians at all, but the power of outraged fans who felt they were being ignored by their clubs.
So the Premier League, as we know it today, really was arguably the result of a breakaway, another breakaway back in 1992 by the top tier clubs. And the Super League idea tends to be compared to what happened back then in 1992. But is this the future of top tier football?
Well, this clearly isn't the end of arguments about how to reform the governance of football. UEFA have been saying they'll shake up the Champions League for years, and of course there's an obvious financial reason why this happened now. The coronavirus robbed football clubs of ticket gate revenue for months, and the clubs who initially were going to join the Super League say that they collectively lost €5 billion in the last year. But their financial difficulties have been brewing for years since the cost of buying top-tier players got so high that unless you are owned, for example, by someone like the Emir of Qatar, clubs are obviously going to end up overstretched. So it's not that surprising that the clubs who were really pushing for this thought that they should be allowed to get more revenue, to ask for more money for international broadcasting rights, perhaps on a pay-per-view basis or via a tech giant like Netflix. And so they were focused on turning their clubs into bigger and bigger global brands. They obviously thought they could get away with upsetting local fans who do come to games in favour of bigger revenue from global television rights and merchandise. But they've been proven wrong. The bosses clearly weren't expecting this level of backlash. And now, of course, the teams who were involved in this are likely to end up with less say in whatever UEFA does decide to do next, since they've managed to upset everyone. So it's really been a spectacular own goal.
Indeed. And of course, the wage to revenue ratios here, at least for the English Premier League on the top end, it's around 67%. On the Championship, it's about 100 and something percent. It's a crazy, crazy number. There's been a lot of talk, though, about the need to protect the existing structure of football in Europe at the moment. But with respect to the UK, what governance changes can the authorities, can the government realistically push through?
Well, yesterday, when it seemed like this plan might happen, the British government said it was looking into all sorts of ways to put pressure on the clubs, including referring them to the competition authorities, imposing measures to change the ownership structures of English clubs, like introducing a rule like that they already have in Germany, whereby fans groups are guaranteed a majority stake in the clubs, or even blocking work visas so that the rebel clubs couldn't buy foreign players. And the collapse of the Super League doesn't mean that there'll be no change to football governance. The government has ordered a wide-ranging review, and it says it will seek to put fans at the heart of how English football is run. So they are looking into maybe copying those German rules I mentioned and other ways to give fans a bigger say. The thing is, of course, that while people know football is a business, this really came across as sheer greed, and so it united people across the political spectrum. And now we see that it's leading to conversations that probably should have been had in English football decades ago.
Indeed, it's not every day you have individuals like Nigel Farage commenting about English football, but that certainly happened in this particular case. One last question for you, Elena. So the Real Madrid president, Florentino Perez, initially when he was defending this idea, one of the things he said was that this Super League is needed to save the game because, in his words, young people are no longer interested in football. But he never provided any data to support his claim, did he?
No, Florentino Perez says 40% of young people are no longer interested in football because the game's not entertaining enough. So he sort of sees it as entertainment in competition with video games and social media, and he says younger people are more interested in big-name stars than in loyalty to any particular team. He even suggested shortening the games because young people apparently don't have a 90-minute attention span. I do think, though, that there's no data that I have seen confirming any of this, and I'm not too convinced that 40% of young people, either here or in Spain, are not interested in football.
Indeed, and he probably should swing by Sub-Saharan Africa and see exactly just how much excitement the sport does have on this side of the world. Elena Casas in London, thank you very much. Now, the South African Music Rights Organisation, or SAMRO as it's more commonly known, has clinched a multi-year licensing agreement with TikTok. The leading short-form video platform has also signed a deal with Capasso, which supports African authors, composers and publishers. Here's Sumitra Naidu with the details.
TikTok has become a massive sensation around the world. It was first launched in 2016 by Chinese company ByteDance. Today it has over 800 million active users across the world. A multi-year licensing deal with the media app is a big deal for African musicians.
South African artists can rest assured that their growth online on platforms like TikTok, because it's not only TikTok that's licensed in this way, Facebook is too, YouTube is as well. So they're able to monetize from their music.
The South African Music Rights Organization represents over 12,000 artists. Capasso also covers over 7,000 musicians directly or through their publishers. TikTok will pay royalties to all registered artists for their songs used on the platform.
This encourages the artists to also increase their visibility on the platform. We know that TikTok has been extremely helpful in the discovery of certain artists. I mean, some songs have literally just blown up by virtue of their visibility on TikTok.
This deal will cover 58 countries across the African continent. TikTok has around 6 million subscribers in South Africa alone.
The territories consist of mostly sub-Saharan countries. We do have some northern countries also in the deal. All our members, being composers and authors and publishing companies, would basically be receiving royalties from the usage of their works on the TikTok platform. What we did is we've negotiated the agreements, the rates, and all the intricacies on the collection element of those royalties.
Music by African songwriters and performers is already proving popular on TikTok. Master KG's Jerusalema dance was also a South African hit that went global through social media.
This is the first South African song that's cracked 300 million streams on YouTube. That's a lot of usage, and then there's a lot of money that is linked to that.
With COVID still restricting big events and prompting budget cuts, many artists are ensuring they have an online presence, especially on media platforms. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
On to West Africa now, where despite a ban on various food imports, even FX restrictions on being able to actually import them, Nigeria's experienced a hike in agricultural imports, and the value of exports has declined by a significant margin. The country is looking for ways to balance the scales, even as efforts are made to maintain food availability. Here's CGTN's Alexandria Majala with that story.
Nigeria's National Bureau of Statistics says that the nation's agricultural imports rose by 5.75% to 1.4 billion in the fourth quarter of 2020 from 1.3 billion in the third quarter. Further, agricultural exports stood at $146.6 million, representing an 8% drop in the fourth quarter from $159.5 million in the third quarter. The report comes on the back of the government policy to improve exports and promote local production. The rise in imports is attributed to poor power supply, poor infrastructure, insecurity, high production costs, high demand owing to Nigeria's population, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic.
The only way to get back the economy, to get us out of the circumstances and the situation we are now, is to be able to strengthen our potential to earn foreign exchange. And the only way to strengthen that potential to earn foreign exchange is through exporting. Because if you don't export, then you can't earn foreign exchange. So if our import to export ratio is imbalanced, it basically, leaves a sour taste. It leaves bad taste to what the economy will look like.
Nigeria's unemployment rate stands at 33%. This is an increase in the idle workforce from 27.1% in the second quarter of 2020. Experts say that this is compounded by a decline in the country's production capacity and export value.
You lose jobs. What you're importing is creating jobs for another nation. And by their exporting, it's creating jobs for them. So it's a substitution game of jobs. And, in a country where the unemployment numbers is very ridiculous and, scary as it is now, you will understand why this implication is far much more disastrous than what you can think.
Nonetheless, Nigeria still made some successful exports like sesame seeds, cassava and oil to China and Japan, fermented cocoa beans to the Netherlands and Indonesia. However, the West African nation's government will have to step up efforts to close the wide gap between agricultural imports and exports. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's on the other side. The UK unveils its ambitious targets to cut down its carbon emissions. And we'll explore why attendants at the Bar Forum for Asia are a bit optimistic about a global recovery.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 48 hours of rain.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. You're watching Global Business. Here's what's making your headlines at this hour. Chad's Transitional Military Council has promised to return power to a civilian government and to hold free and fair elections in 18 months. But opposition politicians in the country have rejected that transition plan, and so has the Front for Change and Concord rebel group in the north. It says it will still march on the capital, N'Djamena. Egypt and Libya have signed 11 cooperation agreements in numerous fields. Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and the Libyan Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dbeibeh took part in the signing ceremony in Tripoli. This is the first time that an Egyptian Prime Minister has visited Libya since the conflict over there broke out back in 2011. And an AU delegation led by the Commission Chair Musa Faki Mohammed has concluded a working visit to Libya. They pledged to support a national reconciliation conference. The AU also says it will help the country prepare for elections that are due to be held in December 2021. That's a run through your headlines. Onto the business of climate change now. The UK is preparing to announce ambitious new climate targets. It wants to cut carbon emissions by nearly 80% by 2035, effectively putting it on course to reach net zero by 2050. Now, this timetable comes after China and the United States agreed to much stronger commitment. The UK's opposition Labour Party says the government needs to match rhetoric with reality. As CGTN's Andrew Wilson now reports.
The calls from environmentalists and the United Nations have been loud and getting louder. The challenge is out there to actually do something.
The next 10 years need to be a decade of transformation. Countries need to submit ambitious new national determined contributions that were defined by the Paris Agreement. Their climate plans for the next 10 years need to be much more ambitious. Third, we need those commitments and plans to be backed up with concrete immediate action.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has led the way with long-term promises, and he's about to announce Britain's intention to legislate 78% carbon emissions cuts by 2035. Not necessarily because he wants to, but because that's the advice from the Independent Climate Change Committee.
What it boils down to is this. The government seems to really enjoy and be very good at signing up to distant targets in the future when they'll all be out of office. And, you know, it's important. Targets matter because they set the destination. But at some point, you actually need to leave and set off on the journey. And we haven't really done that in any area of the economy except for power generation.
So far, the voters haven't been tested. These targets will need draconian changes. Air travel has to be tackled. It'll mean punitive measures for frequent flyers. There are more electric cars on the roads, but this will need a radical culture change, a mass movement away from private to public transport, and ditching gas with a nationwide overhaul on how we heat and insulate our homes. Meat and dairy farming will also be in the firing line for the contribution that livestock makes to global warming. It's a challenge for politics and for the private sector, particularly the energy companies.
While they are ambitious, and the government should absolutely be commended on that level of ambition, they're absolutely achievable. We've already got almost all of the technology that we need to be able to do that, and we'll figure out the rest very soon.
As hosts of the next Global Climate Conference, this is a huge opportunity for the UK to establish itself as a world leader. But the promises need policies, and that means the public getting involved, something the political class has energetically avoided so far. Andrew Wilson, CGTN.
The annual Boao Forum for Asia concludes its 4-day conference on Wednesday. CGTN's Zhou Jiexin looks at what political and business leaders have been talking about at the forum and what has been achieved.
The focus has been Asia, but global issues and human development have also been key to the agenda. We need to be able to invest. With at least 60 panel discussions on topics ranging from the post-pandemic economic recovery, digitalization and sustainable development, participants at the forum were able to reach agreement on some of the world's biggest challenges.
各方普遍地认为，当前世界经济正从深度的衰退。
We believe that the global economy at this current stage is jumping from a severe recession to a recovery amid uncertainties and wide gaps between countries. It is more important than ever before to strengthen global governance and international cooperation. The Belt and Road Initiative has played a positive role in regional connectivity and the economic recovery.
I think the importance of the forum, in addition to the anniversary, it's the classical and light at the end of the tunnel. So it's exactly the, let's say, the value chain of the thinking process. It's the best of all worlds.
One of the global challenges political, business, and academic leaders at the forum have been addressing is the increasingly tense international environment.
And geopolitics, not just between US and China, have become much more difficult. We see this also between the US and Europe, between India and China, but we also see this between many other countries.
It's also been a time for Asian countries to share ideas related to their political identities and ideals.
However strong it may grow, China will never seek hegemony, expansion, or a sphere of influence, nor will China ever engage in an arms race. China will take an active part in multilateral cooperation on trade and investment.
If Asian countries can further innovation cooperation, we will play a bigger role in leading in the future and responding to crisis. We hope this year's Boao annual conference will contribute experience and wisdom to the recovery and further development of human society.
China and Asia have never been more determined to advance and integrate with the rest of the world. They've been rising to the challenge and striving for globalization and their vision of how human civilization should move forward. Zhou Jiexin, CGTN, Boao, Hainan Province.
Now, at that very forum, the future of 5G was also discussed in some length, with some pointing out the development on that particular tech is being sped up. And it could benefit one particular sector that's been hit particularly hard by this pandemic, the travel industry. CGTN's Mayu Yoshida now explains.
The Aomori Nebita Festival is one of Japan's biggest summer festivals. Before the pandemic, millions would dance through the night. This year, a limited number of people are being allowed to take part under COVID restrictions. But what if you were able to attend the festival without ever stepping foot outside your house? I'm here in Tokyo, but through this app I can take part in a festival 700 kilometers away. Now my phone is still 4G, but with the help of 5G technology, creators say faster network speeds allow for more stability and real-time movements. The way it works is I hold my phone on a designated street and I can see the massive festival lanterns on the screen. This virtual tourism is a project developed by Japanese telecom operator KDDI. At the core is 5G connection speeds, which make real-time travel possible. That means virtual tour guides can interact with tourists remotely.
こんにちは。私はコウと言います。
The pandemic prompted us to steer our 5G technology to improving presence in the virtual space. For example, by combining AR and 5G, we can create a virtual guide. This will help reduce human contact under the COVID era.
In reality, Japan is lagging behind global rivals in 5G expansion. Although 5G signals are stronger, they don't reach as far. Building network towers on every corner won't come cheap, especially in a high-density city like Tokyo. A 2018 report by consulting firm McKinsey also pointed to Japan's fragile ecosystem stemming from a lack of global competitiveness and a penchant for domestic innovation as a reason why it's late to the game.
Japan doesn't have as vast land as Europe or the US, so density-wise, we are not that late. But South Korea is ahead of the game as they started coverage early.
Major Japanese carriers are launching more stations. The government says it plans to invest billions in expanding 5G networks industry. If more money and stations help boost internet speed, traveling around in the virtual world might be much faster than boarding a plane. Ma Yoshida, CGTN, Tokyo.
Now, various cars at this year's Shanghai Auto Show do feature some interesting cutting-edge tech, many of which were brought on by conglomerates like Huawei and Baidu. Jiang Shishuan has the details.
With its drones accounting for around 80% of the world market, DJI has become known for making smart machines that can fly. But now it's leveraging that competence into improving things that run underground, with the debut of its new brand offering autonomous driving solutions at the ongoing auto show in Shanghai. Utilizing its experience in sensing, decision-making, and the mass production of precision and reliable hardware, DJI has been working on the application for 5 years. This year's auto show seemed to be the perfect time to show it off.
As a tech company, we're familiar with tech development, but we're new in communicating with consumers and clients in the auto industry. So we want to learn more from this show. And we're very happy to have found out that many car manufacturers are becoming increasingly interested in the technology, which is the theme of this year's event.
The first commercial passenger car fitted with an autonomous driving system developed by Huawei is also making its debut at the event. The model, produced in collaboration with Bike's Arcfox brand, is available for pre-orders and will begin deliveries later this year.
In the past, we were just producing some single components for car makers. This is the first time that we have gathered a large batch of hardware and software solutions into one car. The new model gathers 5 of our solutions, including intelligent driving and a smart cockpit, more than 100 components in all. We did a whole design, the system R&D and hardware. We are now seeking cooperation with other OEMs like Chang'an Auto and the GAC Group.
The automobile industry has recently seen several new entrants, especially with the shift towards autonomous and electric vehicles. Companies like DJI and Huawei. Chinese tech giant Xiaomi has just announced plans to commence manufacture of electric vehicles. And some players that are already putting their technologies into mass production for car makers are also turning up at this year's auto show, an illustration of the large excitement in the market. Chinese tech developer SenseTime has been putting its technology into auto production for more than 30 automakers around the globe. Now, for the first time, it has its own booth at the auto show this year, showcasing its latest cockpit smart solutions. If the driver stands near the door and stares at its camera, it opens the door for you. Okay, I was just told that the system has something that far beyond just facial recognition and data memory. Let's first take a photo. Oh, a virtual assistant. It looks exactly like me, and I will be talking with myself. A little bit weird. And I cannot control the music playing with just simple hand gestures. Oh, it just detects I'm feeling asleep. Well, in real life, you can make it appear with the face of anyone that you would like to talk with. The system can also detect if there are children, pets, or phones left in the car and alert the driver. More than 13 million automobiles around the world are now equipped with sense-time systems.
In 2017, when we first started entering the field, this was kind of a blank area in the auto industry. But now AI technology has filled in the blank. The application of the technology to cars is quite complicated. Vehicles have to run smoothly from minus 40 degrees to 70 or 80 degrees. And the application of visual algorithms to cars is much more complicated than in other areas.
Consulting firm PwC last week released a report on digitalization in the auto industry, saying that software has become a core competitive area for modern cars, with costs for research and development expected to jump 83% within the coming decade. The technology-driven component would take up 60% of consumers' experience value in a car by 2030, it says. And the amount of software in the industry will be triple what it is now. Zhang Shishen, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Still on the business of tech, the tech giant Apple has unveiled a refreshed line of hardware, as well as some new gadgets at a virtual event from its headquarters in Silicon Valley. CGTN's Mark New has that story on What's Hot tonight.
Hello and welcome back to
Apple CEO Tim Cook kicked off his presentation with a nod to Earth Day on April 22nd, announcing a $200 million restore fund that partners with Conservation International and Goldman Sachs.
This pioneering new investment fund will provide returns that are measured not only financially, but by the tons of atmospheric carbon removed by each investment.
Apple got down to business by unveiling its redesigned all-in-one iMac computer that comes in 7 different colors. It features its own M1 Apple Silicon chip, a 4.5K Retina display, and 6 speakers.
Together, these two components help reduce iMac's overall volume by over 50%. The result is a design that's much more compact and just 11.5 millimeters thin.
Apple unveiled its new iPad Pro, which also uses the Apple Silicon M1 chip.
They are all in on their own custom silicon in this M1 chip. And they want their developers to transition as quickly as they can to get all their apps to be native on M1. So I think that's a powerful statement that they made. And it also reinforces the brand to consumers. So people know, oh, this one's got the M1 in it. That's the cool new thing.
The new iPad Pro contains a 12-megapixel ultra-wide camera that, when combined with machine learning, produces a feature called Center Stage.
As you move around, it automatically pans to keep you in the shot. And that's not all. When others join in, it recognizes them too and zooms out to fit everyone into the view.
Apple finally unveiled a product it had been rumored to be working on for years, AirTag. It looks to solve the age-old problem of, where did I put my keys?
As you move, Precision Finding uses our U1 chip to get the precise distance to your AirTag. iPhone fuses that data with input from the camera, accelerometer, and gyroscope to give you visual, haptic, and audible feedback, guiding you right to your AirTag.
All of these things are sort of based on a mesh network concept where, because if you've left your device in a cab, that's the way it has to eventually find it, is through other devices. It doesn't necessarily have a one-to-one connection. So it does actually use other devices to find it.
While AirTags can theoretically leverage billions of Apple devices to improve accuracy, O'Donnell says equally important will be how it secures the privacy of the billions of users helping to make those products smarter. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
All right, then a quick run through commodity prices. Brent crude, of course, did decline in today's session, but let's focus instead on the world's second largest producer of cocoa, Ghana. It reported growth data for 2020 today, growth of just 0.4% last year. That is the slowest growth rate that the country has seen in at least 4 decades. Economic output in the fourth quarter of the year, however, did rise by about 3.3%. That was nearly triple estimates from a panel of economists who were surveyed by Bloomberg. Here's what's coming up next. High prices are denying Egyptians a chance to indulge in a centuries-old dessert. called yamiche. The details coming up shortly.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to the program. One of the most popular dishes that's consumed by Egyptians during the holy month of Ramadan is yamiche. It's a mix of nuts that includes cashews, pistachios and almonds with dried figs, apricots and raisins. Its history is ancient. It dates all the way back to the era of the Fatimid Caliphate. That's more than 1,000 years ago. Here's Yasser Hakim with that story.
It's known as yamiche Ramadan in Egypt. The mix of nuts and dried fruits is always a main item during the holy month that's marked by fasting from dawn to dusk.
Of course, it's one of the main Ramadan traditions. Without yamiche, you don't feel like you're in Ramadan. You buy the mix you prefer. Some people like raisins and apricots together with dates.
The meal is a heavy mix that provides energy which makes up for the day's fasting. Some take it as dessert and others as a separate snack dish. Though popular with Egyptians, many were unable to buy as much as before amid high prices and the economic situation of citizens that have been significantly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic.
The prices are expensive, and because it's a Ramadan season, prices have increased. I still buy it, but at less quantities, because we must have it and eat it during Ramadan.
Statistics show sales have dropped by more than 35% compared to the pre-COVID era, but sellers are optimistic of better sales than last year.
There is higher demand for yamiche this year than last year, and that's why some ingredients saw higher prices. The trend shows even more sales soon.
The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is in the second year, has had an impact on the availability of the yamiche.
Many of the ingredients are being imported from abroad, especially the nuts. And this has been affected because of the slowdown in trade and shipments because of the coronavirus.
This has caused concern for traders and increased prices even further.
We tried our best to provide the product in the market. We looked for more than one supplier to import the products and provide it to clients. Yes, there were ingredients we couldn't receive, but we try our best to supply what we can.
Regardless of these challenges, the yamiche remains a popular and in-demand dish for Egyptians every year. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
One last story for you. This one is from Senegal. The West African state relies heavily on domestically produced food, and roughly 60% of the population make a living from agriculture. It's according to the World Bank. Here's CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy now, bringing you the story of an entrepreneurial approach to agriculture that's been welcomed by many local smallholder farmers who are always looking for more ways to increase their productivity.
After graduating school, Suleimani Inye decided to follow a professional training in horticulture. That training is what marked his first steps in the agriculture sector.
It all started when I was a student at the National Horticulture School. I just made one observation. In most schools, we are often taught the same classical cultures like pepper, tomato, potato, etc. At one point, we wondered why can't we grow some other rare crops? And often, the answers that came back was that it was not possible in Senegal. It was not possible in any other African country.
Strawberry production is not common in Senegal. And after doing many trial runs, Suleimani decided to try growing local organic sweet strawberries in 2016. Frazen produces and commercializes only 100% organic strawberries, a challenge in Senegal where water is scarce.
We had the simple idea of bringing together all the producers who had fields and producing strawberries together, and this is what gave birth to the Frisian network. At a certain point, we told all the farmers who wanted to start growing strawberries to come and join us in our network. We support them with trainings, with funding, and we assist them in the production and marketing.
Suleimani and his partner's latest venture is Bay Sedu, a platform that links farmers with investors. It allows individual farmers to buy parts in a field for 1 to 2 crop rotations from a landowner and then share the dividend. This allows the owner to make a profit from land that would otherwise be left unused. At the end of the growing season, Bay Sedu takes charge of the distribution of the dividends between the different stakeholders following predetermined criteria. Daniel Arap-Moy, CGTN.
A quick run through the currencies as we wrap up the hour. The Naira slipped to around 410.21 at one point in trading today. That's the weakest really we've seen in this year so far, in a tightly controlled currency that's weakened by about 3% so far in 2021. Just last week, in fact, the central bank barred FX access to sugar and wheat imports. So the governor of the central bank, Godwin Emefiele, is saying we must work to produce these items in Nigeria rather than import them. In East Africa, Kenya's currency also ceded ground to the US dollar. It's back above 108 to the greenback. The most recent remittance data was interesting, though. It indicated that $290 million was sent into the country in the month of March. That's nearly 30% higher compared to the same month last year. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program in the last hour. There are many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.